both on This Old House and the New Yankee Workshop for years, we have always promoted safety in all aspects of what we do, but most importantly, in eye protection.
For years after the cameras stopped rolling on the New Yankee Workshop, a different kind of story began circulating online, one that had very little to do with woodworking and everything to do with absence. The man who once stood at the center of one of PBS's most methodical craft series, Norm Abram, slowly became the subject of rumors. Today, we'll move past the rumors and see the real heartbreaking tragedy of Norm Abram from the New Yankee Workshop. Let's start from the very beginning. A lifelong passion for woodworking. Before Norm Abram ever became the calm, methodical face of American woodworking television, his life was already being shaped in a workshop long before cameras entered the picture. Born on October 3, 1949, in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, Abram grew up in an environment where wood, tools, and construction were not abstract skills, but everyday language. His father was a skilled carpenter, and that early proximity mattered. The scent of sawdust, the rhythm of planing, and the repetition of measured cuts formed the backdrop of his childhood in a way school textbooks never could. By the age of 9, Abram was already spending time in his father's workspace, not as a visitor, but as an informal assistant. One of the early shared projects often associated with his upbringing was a pine wood car build, a small but precise exercise in shaping, measuring, and finishing wood into something functional and refined. These early experiences did not just teach technique, they established discipline. Woodworking was not treated as a hobby. It was a craft that required patience, repetition, and respect for material limits. That mindset would later become the foundation of his television identity. Even as his technical instincts developed early, Abram's path was not locked into carpentry alone. After high school in Massachusetts, he enrolled at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, initially pursuing engineering. That direction reflected a different form of structure, mathematics, systems, and design logic, but it did not fully align with his hands-on inclination. He eventually shifted into business administration. After graduating, Abram entered the construction industry in New England, working with a large firm, where he quickly advanced to site supervisor. The work was practical and demanding, involving real-time problem-solving on active build sites. But after roughly 3 years, he stepped away to pursue independence. In 1976, he founded his own company, Integrated Structures Incorporated, a small contracting firm that allowed him to control both design and execution. This phase was critical. It turned Abram from a skilled worker into a builder responsible for entire projects, timelines, and outcomes. While his contracting business grew, an entirely separate path was forming, one that would shift his career trajectory without initially appearing dramatic. In the late 1970s, producer Russ Morash was developing a new PBS concept focused on home renovation, which would become This Old House. Morash was already filming early restoration work in New England when he encountered Abram's contracting work. What stood out was not just technical competence, but communication style. Abram could explain complex carpentry decisions in a way that was clear without being simplified. Morash invited Abram to participate in a Victorian home restoration project in Dorchester, Massachusetts. This project became one of the earliest televised segments tied to what would evolve into This Old House, which officially premiered in 1979. The show's structure was different from traditional television. It documented real renovation work in real time, focusing on process rather than polished outcome. Abram's role was central from the beginning, as he translated construction steps into accessible instruction. What followed was not an overnight rise, but a steady expansion of visibility. As This Old House gained traction on PBS, Abram became a recurring presence known for precision, calm delivery, and technical reliability. By 1989, that foundation led to the creation of the New Yankee Workshop. How the New Yankee Workshop took off. In 1989, American public television quietly launched what looked, at first glance, like a modest experiment in instructional programming. The New Yankee Workshop produced by PBS and closely tied to the already successful This Old House, premiered with no celebrity fanfare, no primetime hype, and no commercial push. It was built as a spin-off, but more precisely, it was a focused extension of an idea that had already proven itself. Viewers were willing to watch real construction, step by step, if the person guiding them knew exactly what they were doing. The setting was a purpose-built workshop in Massachusetts, and at its center stood Norm Abram, a carpenter whose reputation had already been quietly forged in earlier seasons of This Old House beginning in 1979. Norm Abram was introduced as a working carpenter who had already spent years in construction and general contracting in New England. By the time the new Yankee Workshop began, he had accumulated a professional credibility that mattered in a very specific way. PBS audiences were being offered instruction. That distinction shaped everything. Abram's delivery style, measured, calm, almost architectural in its pacing, became the structural backbone of the show. Each cut, joint, and measurement was explained with the assumption that the viewer might actually attempt it themselves, often with expensive hardwoods and power tools that demanded respect rather than experimentation. The format itself was deceptively simple. Each episode typically focused on a single complete woodworking project, ranging from traditional shaker-style furniture to more complex cabinetry and outdoor builds. But behind that simplicity was a tightly controlled production system. Episodes were filmed in a dedicated workshop space designed specifically for camera coverage, lighting, and repeatable work sequences. What appeared to be a seamless flow of craftsmanship was actually the result of carefully staged sequences, multiple takes, and instructional pacing designed to compress what might take days or weeks in a real workshop into a coherent television episode. As the 1990s began, the show's reach expanded far beyond its New England roots. PBS distribution meant national access, and woodworking, once a niche trade skill, found a surprisingly broad audience. Homeowners, hobbyists, and retirees became regular viewers. The show aired for over 2 decades, ultimately running for 21 seasons and producing hundreds of project-based episodes. It became a quiet fixture in American households, not as appointment television, but as a trusted reference point for anyone interested in building something tangible with their hands. In many ways, it normalized the idea that professional-grade craftsmanship could be brought into living rooms without dilution. A critical part of the show's success was its relationship with This Old House, which had already established itself as a pioneering home renovation series since 1979. That earlier program had proven that audiences were willing to engage with long-form construction content. The new Yankee Workshop refined that formula. Instead of renovation chaos or multi-trade coordination, it narrowed its focus to one discipline: woodworking. This specialization gave it a sharper identity and allowed Abram to function not as a general host, but as a singular authority in his field. The early success of the series also reflected a broader shift in instructional media during the late 1980s and early 90s. Before the internet, learning complex skills required physical books, trade schools, or apprenticeships. PBS programming like this filled a unique gap. Viewers could observe precise techniques in real time: how to select lumber, how to align joints, how to use routers, table saws, and chisels with accuracy. The show effectively turned woodworking into a visual curriculum broadcast at scale. Norm Abram's on-screen presence remained remarkably stable over the years. He did not rely on dramatic presentation or exaggerated reactions. Instead, his authority came from repetition, precision, and restraint. The calm cadence of his explanations, paired with the rhythmic sounds of saws, sanders, and clamps, created a distinctive viewing experience that felt closer to guided apprenticeship than a TV show. But of course, this was only one side of the equation: what the show actually looked like behind the camera. By the time cameras rolled on the new Yankee Workshop, the image on screen suggested something deceptively intimate: a single craftsman, a quiet workshop, and a piece of hardwood slowly transforming under careful hands. But behind that calm visual rhythm was not a home garage or casual hobby space. It was a fully engineered production environment in Massachusetts, purpose-built for television, designed with one priority above all others: control. Every angle, every tool placement, and every beam of light was arranged so that woodworking could be seen, repeated, and explained without uncertainty. The workshop itself was not improvised or domestic. It was a professionally equipped studio space fitted with industrial-grade woodworking machinery, dust collection systems, and organized stations for cutting, shaping, and assembly. The layout was not accidental. It was designed for camera access. Wide aisles allowed movement for filming crews, while fixed positions ensured that key actions, like table saw cuts or joinery assembly, could be captured cleanly from multiple perspectives. What looked like a natural working shop was, in reality, a set optimized for repeatable instruction. Every project that entered the workshop began long before wood was ever cut. Planning sessions determined not just what would be built, but how it would be shown. Producers and Norm Abram mapped each build with filming clarity in mind, breaking projects into sequences that could be taught in digestible segments. A single furniture piece might be divided into conceptual phases, such as stock preparation, joinery, assembly, and finishing, each carefully structured so that viewers could follow without losing track. The goal was not to replicate real-time woodworking chaos, but to convert it into a visual syllabus. That transformation required repetition that viewers never fully saw. Many steps were performed more than once, not because the craft demanded it, but because the camera did. A single cut on a board might be executed again from a different angle. An assembly step might be paused, reset, and redone, so that lighting and framing could clearly capture alignment or technique. These were not errors. They were production necessities. In television terms, woodworking became performance under controlled conditions, where clarity mattered more than continuity of time. This structure had a subtle but powerful effect on perception. On screen, projects appeared to unfold smoothly from start to finish, often within a single episode's runtime. In reality, what viewers saw compressed was a far more fragmented timeline. Builds that would typically span multiple days in a working shop were condensed into edited sequences that eliminated downtime, tool changes, and material delays. The final edit removed uncertainty. What remained was a version of craftsmanship that appeared uninterrupted, precise, and almost effortless in its execution. That editorial refinement shaped one of the show's most enduring impressions, the idea of the flawless craftsman. Norm Abram rarely appeared to hesitate, correct mistakes, or struggle with materials in the final cut. Measurements aligned and joints fit, and surfaces finished cleanly. The visual language reinforced a sense that mastery was smooth and predictable, but that perception was the result of editing decisions that prioritized teaching over realism. Even the pacing of the show reinforced this controlled reality. Episodes were structured so that complex operations were broken into calm, linear progressions. There was no visible rush, no cluttered multitasking, and no overlapping chaos typical of real construction environments. Instead, each segment isolated a single idea or technique, allowing viewers to absorb it without distraction. This was not accidental storytelling. It was a pedagogical design shaped by decades of experience in instructional television production under PBS standards. Speaking of behind the camera's details, the reality of rumors about the heartbreaking tragedy of Norm Abram. In the digital aftermath of the new Yankee Workshop, a second story has formed around Norm Abram, one that runs parallel to the actual broadcast history. Norm Abram's transition away from full-time television after 2009 created silence, which allowed rumors to pick up pace. Without ongoing weekly exposure, some viewers began to assume decline, and algorithm-driven content filled the gap with emotionally charged interpretations rather than documented facts. What remains constant in verified records is far more grounded. Abram's career did not end due to illness or scandal, and there is no public statement from him, PBS, or this old house confirming any major health crisis. Instead, his gradual step back from the new Yankee Workshop aligns with a long occupational timeline that began in the late 1970s. The show concluded in 2009 after 21 seasons, not because of a tragedy, but because the production cycle naturally ended and Abram reduced his workload. Online rumors often convert absence into mystery and mystery into tragedy. But in Abram's case, there is no verified medical event to anchor such claims. No hospitalization reports, no confirmed illness timeline, and no public health disclosure exist in credible records. And no, he does not have cancer. These rumors are completely unfounded. So, why did he step back from the show then? Decades of continuous hands-on work in television carpentry naturally took its toll. Unlike many television hosts, Norm Abram was not separated from the labor he demonstrated. On camera, he performed actual woodworking tasks, cutting hardwood stock, operating saws, assembling joinery, and handling full-scale furniture projects. The materials were not props. They were heavy hardwoods like oak, maple, and cherry, commonly used in fine furniture construction. Each episode required sustained physical engagement, often involving prolonged standing, lifting, and precise tool operation. Production structure intensified that workload. Episodes were filmed in controlled studio conditions in a dedicated workshop space, designed for instructional clarity. Builds were broken into filming segments, often requiring multiple takes for different camera angles and explanations. What might be a continuous workflow in a private shop became a segmented process under production demands. A single cut, joint, or assembly step could be repeated not because of difficulty, but because television required visual completeness from multiple perspectives. This structure also meant that woodworking was compressed into tightly scheduled production blocks. Instead of open-ended workshop time, filming typically occurred over a few concentrated days per episode. Within those periods, multiple hours of standing, repositioning materials, resetting camera shots, and repeating demonstrations were routine. The rhythm of natural craftsmanship, start, pause, adjust, continue, was replaced by a rhythm dictated by lighting cues, camera readiness, and instructional pacing. Over a span exceeding 2 decades, this cumulative physical demand became the most consistent reality of Abram's television career. Long-term exposure to repetitive motion, heavy material handling, and extended standing is a known factor in trades work generally. And Abram's television role did not remove him from those conditions. Instead, it embedded those conditions into a broadcast environment. The workshop environment, the production structure, and the physical demands of continuous carpentry created a professional lifespan defined by endurance rather than crisis. Norm Abram's visibility decreased after the show ended, but what changed was the schedule, not evidence of decline. The end of an era. In 2009, after 2 decades of steady presence on American public television, the new Yankee Workshop came to a quiet end. The final season closed not with controversy or abrupt cancellation, but with the kind of procedural finality that matched its entire identity. Spanning 21 seasons from its 1989 debut, the show had become one of PBS's longest-running instructional woodworking series, anchored entirely by Norm Abram's consistent on-screen craftsmanship. When production stopped, it was because the format had run its natural course across changing television eras. The decision to step away from full-time production work was closely tied to time itself. By the late 2000s, Norm Abram was in his late 50s, having already spent roughly 3 decades working in physically active construction and television carpentry combined. The demands of the show, hands-on woodworking, repeated demonstrations, and sustained studio labor had remained consistent since the early days. What changed was not the workload, but the accumulation of years behind it. The slowdown was gradual, reflecting a professional lifespan shaped more by endurance than by any single turning point. There was no documented scandal, forced exit, or production controversy behind the ending. PBS programming records and public accounts of the series do not indicate any disputes that led to cancellation. The show concluded as part of a natural programming life cycle, consistent with long-running instructional series that eventually phase out as production priorities shift and hosts reduce active involvement. In contrast to entertainment television, driven by ratings volatility, the new Yankee Workshop operated in a more stable public broadcasting environment where longevity was determined by utility and sustainability rather than episodic competition. Even after stepping back from the Workshop series, Norm Abram did not fully disappear from the broader This Old House ecosystem. His involvement continued in a reduced capacity, with occasional appearances and contributions tied to the long-running renovation series that had originally introduced him to national audiences in 1979. This continuity reflected his role less as a conventional television host and more as an institutional craftsman within PBS programming, a figure whose expertise remained relevant even when not fronting a dedicated series. What makes the end of the new Yankee Workshop notable is not the disruption, but the absence of it. There was no public health disclosure event, no confirmed medical crisis, and no verified controversy surrounding the conclusion of production. Instead, the end aligns with a career pattern typical of physically demanding professions: long-term engagement, followed by a gradual reduction in workload. In Abram's case, that trajectory was shaped by decades of hands-on woodworking performed under studio conditions that required sustained physical effort, lifting lumber, operating machinery, and standing for extended filming periods. Across 21 seasons, the show maintained a stable instructional format that emphasized precision, safety, and structured learning. Its influence extended beyond entertainment value into practical education, helping viewers understand woodworking as a disciplined craft rather than an abstract hobby. That educational identity remained intact even as television trends shifted toward faster pacing and more personality-driven formats. Even after 2009, the new Yankee Workshop continued to circulate in reruns, educational contexts, and woodworking communities. Its episodes became reference material for hobbyists and professionals alike, preserving techniques in a format that predated widespread online instructional video platforms. In that sense, the show outlived its original broadcast window. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.